Hello, welcome back to Better Every Day. John and Darren back with you.
Hey, John.
Darren, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Wish we had a cup of coffee in front of us, but this'll do.
I have my Starbucks hanging here.
That's right. Yep. I got an energy drink today. My kids got me hooked on these Alanis, and
That
I'm
sounds
twitchy.
like a bad idea.
Yeah, I think one thing, with my anxiety and my flair for drama anyway, the last thing I need is another way to get caffeine in my body.
But you need a drink that gives you more drama. Oh, yeah. This should be fun.
Oh, boy. Who knows where this podcast is going today with as much caffeine as I got in me.
Oh, yeah. We got a good topic, too. So this will be all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I love about the whole podcast genre is that it's conversation based. And, when we first started this, we used to outline it and we used to create. It was almost like we made a PowerPoint presentation for our podcast. You think about where we've come, and now it's like we have a conversation and we say things like, okay, let's stop talking about that now so that we can save that for the pod.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity for people who like to listen to us. I mean, both of them.
Yeah.
To,
Mom,
yeah. Claudia. But for them to listen to sort of what we like to talk about when we're hanging out at the coffee shop. And
yeah,
that's kind of what it is.
It is. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. I think I'm going to let you explain what we're talking about today, because I'm excited about the topic, but I like the way you introduced it to me. And rather than me flailing around trying to explain it, I want you to introduce it. And then I got some questions for you.
I mean, this super personal one for me, particularly, but the idea is, how we're all in relationships. It could be marital relationships, could be business relationships, could be just, friendship relationships. And in those relationships, we have a tendency, not a tendency, it's just we evolve at different rates, right? For instance, use my wife and I as an example. I mean, I'm a voracious reader. I'm open-minded. I like to take new concepts. I like to figure out how those concepts apply to me. I'm comfortable holding things loosely and not being set, on my opinions. I have opinions, but, not holding them so tightly that the other person's stupid kind of thing. So that's my nature, right? My wife's nature is different than that. She doesn't, she's, I don't want to use the word conservative. She's more, she likes things to stay the same.
Yeah.
Maybe is a way of thinking about that. And that's not me. So, how do you evolve in a marital relationship when people are changing or not changing so much? I think about this, John, as it relates to politics. People are evolving it and moving in different ways in their spiritual worlds. All this stuff is that a way of introducing this? Do you think that?
Yeah, I think the complication in the conversation is about this feeling that somehow, in order to be in a healthy relationship with someone, whether that's a marriage, whether that's a friendship, whether that's a family member, whether that's a coworker, that you have to believe the same things, agree on major topics, and evolve at the same rate or move at the same rate. And I think, honestly, there was a portion of history where that was true. I mean, Darren, that the way we both were raised is that phrases like unequally yoked, phrases like not, even my grandparents, who were wonderful human beings, had feelings and even made them explicit about interracial relationships.
Yeah.
Things that now we look at and go, man, this feels antiquated, and it feels like we've moved from this. And I think this is the way we need to be thinking about the growth of one person versus another inside of our personal relationships and our work relationships.
If you think about, well, just look at myself. I got married nearly 41 years ago, and met my wife, or started dating my wife, nearly 47 years ago. At that point in time, the internet didn't exist. The sources of news were ABC, NBC, and CBS.
If you could get them on your rabbit ears on the TV.
Until like 9 o'clock or midnight, when the screen came on after Sammy Terry and went, So
Sammy Terry.
That was on Saturday.
That's an Indianapolis only thing, I think.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are not from Indianapolis, he was this creepy guy.
Yeah.
That had this show. He came out of a coffin and stuff. It's kind of crazy. Yep. But our sources of information, I guess, is the way I'd think about that, John, were pretty narrow.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty easy. Well, I shouldn't say that, because I would have been too young to really know. But it feels like it was easier for people to sort of, you had one source of news.
Yeah.
You went to, one church, and you didn't have really the ability to get information beyond that. And so to stay equally yoked in some respects was different then. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And I think the idea of the conversation we're having around this right now is about creating another layer of health and acceptance in the relationships with people that we care about. And the phrase that you keep using is respect, which I think is a really loaded word. But I do think it's the right word to be able to look at someone's life, their belief system, their setup, their perspective on life, and go, I respect who you are and the way that you see the world.
Yeah, I look at politics right now.
Yeah.
Super loaded culture that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether you're leaning left or you're leaning right, or you're far right or you're far left, I mean, the concept of respect doesn't seem to be in there anywhere. So if you're, if you have a sticker on your car, you're flying a flag, or you're doing whatever you're doing, right? Somebody else immediately forms an opinion of disrespect, it seems like. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but I think to live in the same household and not and two people that are not going to grow at the same rate, right? And they're going to develop different ideas and opinions based on sort of who they are. The only way it feels to me like you can grow together and have a fulfilling relationship is to have a level of respect for that other person. That doesn't mean that you change the way you think about something, or that you stop reading, or that you start reading, or you all these things, but that you're comfortable with who you are, and yet you can respect that other person for who they are.
Yeah. So I had dinner the other night with my family.
I heard you say, yeah. Does that I think you're crazy.
Not, I think you're crazy. Yeah, I don't think that we've defined the word respect right.
Okay.
So I think you're right. I think what I'd like to do now is let's try to unpack what respect is. So the other night I'm eating with my family, and my son comes in talking about how much he dislikes this teacher.
I love Reese.
Oh, he's such a funny dude. And the way he talks is so funny, and he's so witty and so quick that we laugh and we joke around. And so it becomes acceptable for him to say these things about this woman that I don't even know.
Yeah.
And so at one point, my wife says, "Hey, it doesn't sound like you're respecting this teacher very much." And so we had this conversation. Like, what does that even mean?
Mm.
The truth is, no, I don't respect her. And we had that age-old conversation about, do you earn respect or do you give respect? Does somebody, because in Reese's mind, this teacher doesn't earn any respect. So why should he respect her? And so it got us talking about, and that's why you heard my little hesitation there in your comments, because I think we haven't defined this respect. So what we did in that moment was kind of go around the table, not in a formal way, but just kind of, what do you think respect is? And where we kind of landed was, respect is nothing but being able to look at someone and say, what does life look like from your seat? And so what we ended up saying was, Reese, can you imagine being this teacher and coming to school every day, making $38,000 a year and having to deal with you and your buddies every day? And he then began to laugh. It didn't change his whole world, but he started laughing. Oh my gosh. And I said, so what do you think she's thinking? And he's making jokes about his buddies and about himself and about his AirPods being in and all of a sudden he's respecting her. Well, does that mean that he agrees with her or that he likes her even? No. It means that he can see the world for a minute from the perspective of somebody outside of himself. And to me, think of it just in terms of you and your wife, or me and my good friend who have completely ended up on different sides of the spectrum in terms of spirituality and politics. Yet I still can't wait to talk to him, because we have the ability to see the world from the other person's perspective and not expect something from them because of our relationship.
I like that. Just thinking through why it feels like we've gotten to such disrespect in everything, in religion, politics, classroom. How have we gotten so polarized? I know it's a word that gets used a lot, but I mean, how have we gotten so polarized that we immediately discount, even in our relationships, personal relationships? How have we gotten to where we're all taking sides?
So this book, I just finished it. I haven't suggested it to you yet because I never do until I get through something. It's called The 7 Primal Questions. And what this guy says is, and I'm kind of extrapolating a little bit from his book to answer your question, I think, that what we're experiencing in terms of the polarization of people is primal. It is a regression of society. So, you think about, I don't know why it always helps me to think of like a caveman and a community of people. Their number one priority is safety. I got to live today, and then I got to live tomorrow. And the best way for me to do that is to surround myself with people who have the exact same interest as I have, the same beliefs, the same fears, the same, eventually, skin color, outlook on life, skill sets. And we grew. We began to evolve to a point where we realized, oh my gosh, we're better when we don't all think the same and feel the same. We actually complement each other, and we learn to grow. And what this guy believes is that there's these primal questions that are going on in our brain, and what the polarization has done, and what the fear of the military conquests and all of the anger that's been surfaced has done is it's caused this regression in us to go back to that time when we are so scared that we hang on to people who look like us, act like us, talk like us, believe like us. And somehow there's this primal caveman in us that believes that that's the best way to survive. And we've learned throughout history that's not true, but we're regressing. I don't know, that I just read this, and I wonder if that's part of the issue.
So how do we take all of this and even recognize this in our personal lives today? How do we recognize how we are responding and the positioning, or the, I don't know what word I'm trying to use, but the way we are projecting?
Mm-hmm.
How do we just take a moment and recognize whether we are respecting other people, or if we're growing at different rates, which we obviously are? And, how do we think about that without it becoming constant arguments or separations or whatever that is?
Man, I think it's a great question. And I don't know that there is one answer. I mean, I think for me, my personality is to avoid conflict at all costs. I know that about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do in order to keep conflict out of my life is I write people off. I categorize them and I write them off. I don't want to have an argument with that person. So they are this in my brain.
You're dead to me.
It's not, it's what almost feels like at its worst, but at its most benign, it's more like I'm not going there.
Yeah.
And what that does is it immediately stops the relationship from growing. Like that's just, it's like it's frozen in time. If I write that off, or I categorize you as that thing, that's where our relationship stops. Maybe it's fine there, but we're never going to get past that. And so what I have to do is continue to come into this like personality reflection of like, am I imposing my own inconsistencies and problems in my personality to this relationship? And it happens often when I realize that I'm doing that. This quote I've been saving here. I think now's the time to tell you this quote. I think you're going to really like this. I didn't share with you off the pod because I wanted to get your natural reaction to this thing. Is part of the problem we have with an inequity or a difference in the way that we see the world with people that we love, is part of it a set of unspoken expectations? So here's the quote. This is a quote from a New York Times writer that I follow that I really like. He said, "Inexpressed or unspoken expectations are planned resentments." So if there is something that you expect from someone that you love, or anyone, whether you explicitly say that or not, most of the things we expect from someone, things like, I expect you to want to grow as a person, I expect you to want to be open-minded about new things. You may have never said that to the person that you care about, but if that expectation exists in your relationship, those become planned resentments. Those are things that are going to be resentments because they're unspoken things you have not made explicit to this person. You're holding them to standards they aren't even aware of, and it's not fair.
I think it's incredible. I think it's true. I mean, my personal experiences would say that that's true.
Yeah, me too.
Because I have a tendency to probably think that other people are going to think about the world like I do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I create these levels of expectations that someone, why would you not want to read and grow? Right? Why would you not want to do that? And then when somebody doesn't do that, you hold out a set of resentment, or you lose some level of respect.
Absolutely.
To use that word again. And that's where problems seem to get caused. So Yeah, I completely buy into that.
So I said that in response to your question about like, what do we do about this problem? And I think it starts with this introspection, maybe, where you go, am I expecting something of this person that I haven't made clear?
Mm.
Either to myself, because it's subconscious. Um, let's take it out of marriage for a minute. Let's put it into a relationship between you and a coworker. Or here's even a better one: a relationship between an owner of a company and his or her employee. There is an expectation that was part of life during the 1980s and before, where a company owner would feel like their employees should care as much about the company as they do. That's an unrealistic expectation. You've got so much bigger upside. This is your life. This is my job. Don't
Yeah.
expect me to care like them. But if you have that expectation of me, whether it's explicit or not, and you're going to
Mm.
constantly be mad at me. You're going to constantly be resenting the fact that I went home at 5 o'clock when your car is still in the parking lot. You're going to constantly have this list of little tiny resentments that you can draw specific lines back to expectations that were inexplicit. And if you take that, and I mean, that's a very, very concrete example, but you take that back to, and you add that to all of your relationships and all of the little tiny expectations you may have of someone. I've got a friend, Darren, who I love so much. He's a friend we both have, and you'll know who it is when I'm talking about, but I won't say names. Who I love so much and just a wonderful human being, but he has a terrible habit in conversations of interrupting you. You get a little bit into a conversation and you know he's going to interrupt you. And it's just quick. It's quick. It's quick. My expectation is that when I'm having a conversation with somebody, you pause and let me talk. I know my relationship would get better with this guy if I would say, do you know this? You're doing this? This causes me to feel like you don't respect me. So I get into a conversation with him and our friendship kind of has peaked because I just got to get away from him. Whereas if I went to him and I said, listen, I have this expectation that I'm getting out there. Is this fair or is it not fair that you give me time to speak when we talk? He would immediately either go, well, that's stupid. That's not how I live my life. Or he would go, oh my gosh, I don't realize I'm doing this.
But sorry, I was
No,
trying
no,
to
it's good.
say.
You just interrupted me. I promise I wasn't talking about you. No, I'm sure, though, here's the truth. I'm sure I have resentments for Darren, as good of friends as we
What?
are. I know I resent things from you and you do from me that we have not spoken to each other.
I don't have resentments. I just think they're funny.
They're funny at first and then they become annoying. But those we call them annoyances, we call them idiosyncrasies, we call them whatever. At their most benign, they are funny. They are at their worst. And after 41, 45 years of being together, those annoyances, those idiosyncrasies, those unspoken expectations become resentments. And resentments lead to polarization.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. So I think the takeaway for
Yeah, what
today,
is the takeaway?
I think it's your quote. I think it's recognizing in yourself if you have these unspoken resentments. I mean, we need to grow the way that we need to grow as human beings, and we need to realize that not everybody grows at the same rates, and
Yeah.
people change over time. And there's lots of inputs today that didn't exist. So the idea we're all going to be on the same page like we were 40 years ago is probably a little more challenging. So then, what are these unspoken resentments that maybe these are more in relationships that we have,
Mm-hmm.
personal business and things, and just
So
recognizing those.
the resentments are the end of the quote. The expectations are what the
Yeah.
unspoken expectations are what cause those resentments. So if you can maybe there's somebody in your life that you're really frustrated with right now. Rather than sitting and thinking through the things that you're so frustrated with, could you instead go back and go, Are there any expectations? I'm just going to write them down. Are there things in my brain that I expect of this person that I have never told them? And if you don't know, start with what annoys you the most, the resentments, and take back to that.
I mean, I guess I would ask the question is it even fair for me to have that expectation? So
Yeah.
what expectation do I have? But I mean, what gives me the right to have that expectation?
And maybe that will stop the resentment because you realize the problem is in you and not in them.
Maybe that's the takeaway for today.
I honestly, I think that's usually the takeaway for getting better every day.
Yeah.
When you think that the external is the problem, it's usually a symptom of something that's actually starts in you.
Yeah. Great way to end a podcast, John.
Hey, it's a good time.
Well, we hope something resonated with you guys today. Because I mean, I find this to be a big challenge in my own personal life. I'm sure John experiences this, and I'm sure you guys do as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening today. Hope you heard something that made your day better, made you better every day. See you next time.
Thanks, John.